Hey guys, welcome to the beginning of Unit 10. In this unit, we are going to go through some area and perimeter of two-dimensional objects. So that will be the title of the unit, is just area and perimeter. And in 10.1, we start with rectangles, parallelograms, and triangles. And in this unit, we'll just focus on two or three different shapes in each lesson. And before we get to that, just a kind of reminder of what area and perimeter are. Area is the amount of space and we measure that space in squares that a 2D figure takes up. And then on the right here, I just have a picture of a rectangle. And way back in elementary school, you first started learning about area, and they probably taught it to you like this. They probably said, okay, here's a rectangle. We're going to break it up into squares. So we're going to draw squares. I know those aren't perfect, but something like that. And the area then of that rectangle would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you'd maybe say 8 square units or 8 units squared. Okay. And then how they kind of broke that down for you is they said, okay, the height of it was 2 units and the length of it was 4 units. So you could more easily figure that out by doing 2 times 4. But that's where the square unit things comes from. I think that's one thing that students are sometimes like, why are we talking about square units? And it's because that's how area is measured, the amount of square units, either inches or meters or feet or just units that a 2D figure takes up. All right. And then perimeter is the distance around the outside of a 2D object. Oops. So for perimeter, you would just count how many boxes it is all the way around the outside. So if we started here, we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the perimeter would be 12 units. Perimeter is not square units because it is just a distance, the distance around the outside. All right, so now we'll go into our first shape, which is a rectangle. So we're going to draw a rectangle once again. And I like to use base for one side of the rectangle and height for the other side. Maybe you've seen length and width before. Maybe you've seen length and height. I like base and height because it helps us stay a little bit more consistent with the rest of the variables we use in the unit. So B stands for base and H stands for height. And for formulas, the area of a rectangle is base times height. And the perimeter, remember, is the distance all the way around. So what you could do is you could just add up all the sides. Once we get into an example, you'll see it. We can just add up all the sides. Or we can do it this way. We can take a little bit of a shortcut. We have 2 heights that need to be counted. And we have 2 bases that need to be counted. So what we could do is we could do 2b plus 2h. So that's probably the one that I'll stick with. So perimeter, area equals base, or sorry, area equals base times height. Perimeter equals 2b plus 2h. All right, next one is a parallelogram. Parallelograms, we can draw a picture here. We've talked about them a little bit already this year, but we haven't talked about how to find the area and perimeter of them. So with a parallelogram, we can still use b for base. So b equals base. And we can still use h for height. The difference here, or the thing that we need to do, is we need to realize that this line here, do this, that is not a height. Okay, that's a slant height. It's slanty. It's not It's not perfectly vertical. So what we need to do is we need to add a vertical line. Usually it's dashed, but I think that's hard to see, so we'll just make it solid so that it's perpendicular to the base. So h equals height once again, but we need to remember that our height has to be perfectly vertical. Okay, well with that, we get to use the exact same formula, because if you were to take this little triangle here off and move it over here, we'd have to kind of flip it, mirror image it, but we would end up with a perfect rectangle once again. So a parallelogram is actually a rectangle. It's just oriented, or it's like shifted a little bit. So we can use the exact same formulas. We can still have area equals base times height. Well, our area formula is exactly the same. Our perimeter is actually actually a little different. Our perimeter, we have to kind of add all the sides. We can't use 2 base plus 2 height because our height is not part of the perimeter. These slanted sides are part of the perimeter, and they're going to be a little bit longer than the height. So I'm just going to say add up all those sides. The last one before we get into a couple of examples is a triangle. And a triangle, draw a little picture over here, make it look like this. A triangle is always half of a rectangle. So in this one, maybe it doesn't look so much like it is, but if we were to complete a rectangle, the area that that triangle takes up is exactly half of the rectangle. So the formula for a triangle is just half of a rectangle. So area is base times height still, but we have to divide it by 2. So that's typically the formula I'll use. Some people will use area equals 1/2 base times height. You can use either one, whatever one you're more comfortable with. Like I said, I usually use the first one, but it's up to you. They both do the same thing. And then for perimeter, you just want to add up all 3 sides. And if we go back to our diagram, our base is again one of your sides. It really doesn't matter which one you choose, but then your height needs to be perpendicular to your base. That's your height there. So B is still base, H is still height. Big thing is that H is perpendicular to B. Make sure that that happens. All right, so we're gonna do a couple examples here. We'll do a parallelogram and a triangle, and we're finding the area and perimeter of each. So what I want to do first, once you get these copied in your notebook, is just identify the base and the height first. So our base, our little b, is going to be 6 centimeters plus 7 centimeters, which is 13 centimeters. And our height is given to us there. It's right here. It's 8 centimeters. So when we find the area of a parallelogram is just base times height. It's 13 centimeters times 8 centimeters. I'm going to write down the formula one more time. B times H, just so you guys can have that in your notes. Okay, and then 13 centimeters times 8 centimeters is, I have that somewhere, 104. But then remember, centimeters gets multiplied by centimeters also. Centimeters times centimeters is centimeters squared. So that's our final area answer. Okay, now for perimeter, this one's going to take a little bit of work. We do know the 2 bases already. We have 2 of the sides. So we have a 13 centimeters and a 13 centimeters. But we don't have these sides just yet. Okay, so the question is, well, how do we find those? Well, we have a little right triangle right here. And if we have 2 sides of the third triangle, we can always find the third side of that right triangle using the Pythagorean theorem. So these problems can be a lot of work. I don't think it's hard work all the time, but they do take some time. So let's figure that out. 6 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. 36 and 64. That's going to be 100. Take the square root. and we're going to get 10 for C. So now we do know each of these sides is 10. So now we can find the perimeter. Switch colors one more time. Perimeter is 2 10s plus 2 13s. So our perimeter is 20 plus 26, which would be 46. And remember, those are just regular centimeters. We didn't multiply centimeters times centimeters. So just like that. And that. All right. This video is getting a little on the long side, so let's try to cruise through this last example here. We need to find the area and the perimeter of a triangle. So the formula for area is base times height divided by 2. Well, we have the base, but right now we don't have the height. If we have two sides of a right triangle, we can always find the third using Pythagorean theorem. So let's do that. We have 5 squared plus something squared. We can call it h squared equals 13 squared. 25 plus h squared equals 169. And what's that going to be? 144. And the square root of 144 is 12. So now we have the height. 12 is the height. So now we can go ahead and find everything. So area is going to be, I'm just going to slide this down and kind of use the same thing. So we're going to have base is 5 inches times height, which is 12 inches, over 2. And then 5 times 12 is 60 inches squared divided by 2, which is 30 square inches. So that's our area. Area is 30 square inches. And then perimeter, we're finally almost done here. Perimeter is just add up all three sides. So it's going to be 5 inches plus 12 inches plus 13 inches. Altogether is going to be, what is that? That's also 30 inches. It's kind of interesting that that happened like that. So perimeter is 30 inches. Area is 30 square inches. So go ahead and complete the practice for 10.1.